don't have much time, so let's get right to it.
Howdy, folks. Back in November, I learned of an upcoming comic written and illustrated by Dutch animator Sven Stoffels. Known for his work as an animator and director for the short-lived shows Trip Tank and Like, Share, Die, and for his YouTube channel of animated shorts. I wasn't familiar with Stoffels before the podcast interview where he spoke of his upcoming comic, but I was sold on the story he described. To me, it sounded like turn-off-your-brain stupid comedic fun. With the combination of that and its low cost, I backed the crowdfunding campaign for the book and have received my digital copy. But did it live up to my expectations? I'm going to let you know in this mostly spoil-free rundown. I'm Jess Zilla, and this is my moronic opinion on Butch Killiogan #1. Before getting into my review, I'll give full transparency. I've been fortunate enough to be in contact with Sven Stoffels, and I gave him my review notes before this video was released. However, he has no control over what opinions I'm allowed to express in this video. Butch Killiogan #1 is 116 pages long and comes to us from indie comic company Iconic Comics, with both the story and art by Sven Stoffels. Due to moments of violence and foul language, I would recommend this book for teen readers and older. Here's a quick plot synopsis. In the year of our Mega Man, 20XDX, a cliché, loose-cannon, quip-spouting super cop who plays by his own rules works as a DEA agent in the crime-ridden Ultra City. After busting up a drug deal involving a mysterious cult, title character Butch Killigan ends up in a situation over his head and living in a nightmare that he couldn't have possibly imagined. I'll kick this review off by focusing on the artwork. Overall, I do like the art, but I do have one problem with it: the backgrounds. I'm not a fan of the Xeroxed picture look used for backgrounds in comics. I know it's a technique that's been used before, but it's just an aesthetic that I've never cared for. To be fully honest, I really didn't notice this until my second read-through. I was just more focused on the well-penciled characters and their actions. When I mentioned this to Stoffels, he told me that the backgrounds aren't photos, but actually assets that he created and photo-bashed from his time working as a designer for video games, with filters placed over them. He said that his primary focus for his artwork was on the characters and their actions rather than the backgrounds, and he hoped that the characters are what the reader would focus the most on. Obviously, this worked in my case the first time I read the book, so I have to give him credit for his pencils drawing my gaze to what he wanted me to focus on. While I did feel better and appreciate how the backgrounds were executed by Stoffels after his explanation, it's still an aesthetic I'm not wild about. However, it's not something that prevents me from enjoying this book overall. Moving on to the story. The only other negative thing I have to say about Butch Killiogan is that I felt frustrated when I reached the end. But that's really a good thing. It just means I want more of this story and to see where it goes. The story is well paced and there's no fat that I could see needing to be cut out of it. This book is a satirical comedy and the humor landed for me. However, the second half of the book takes an unexpected dark and weird turn. But don't take that as a complaint. The tonal change is executed very well without feeling like the story is suffering from a case of tonal whiplash. In reading this story and doing some background research of Sven Stoffels, I learned that he has a pretty edgy sense of humor that some folks aren't going to care for. But I do applaud Stoffels for showing some restraint and not relying on overtly sexual or gross-out humor, violence, gratuitous nudity, and an overuse of swearing that some creators will resort to just in the name of being shocking for a punchline or scares. But don't take that as me being against edgy satirical humor or over-the-top and nearly comical violence. Those are just things that I feel like that very few storytellers have been able to master. Speaking of the satire, I'm going to give this one spoiler just because I could see something like it happening in the future. If you don't want this moment ruined for you, then just skip to the on-screen timestamp because I'm moving on in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. About a fourth of the way through the book, we get this moment where the cult leader challenges Butch to a good old-fashioned Wild West duel. When Butch goes to draw his gun prematurely, he finds that it seems stuck in its holster, and then receives a communique from his chief that use of his weapon is unauthorized because his life does not appear to be in sufficient enough danger to use his gun. While Butch was trying to play dirty in this scene, so the inability of him to draw his weapon is justified, I could see it happening where a police officer has to request approval from a superior before drawing their weapon, even when their life is in clear danger within my lifetime. When speaking to Stoffels about this moment, he told me that in the many years that he has quietly been working on the story of Butch Killiogan, that he has seen things that he jokingly put into the story that have now come to pass for American police, and we'll see more moments similar to this as the series progresses. For the characters, we don't really learn much about the supporting cast as the story mainly sticks with Butch. However, since this is the premiere story, I have no doubt that they will be more clearly defined characters as the story continues. I'm not going to get into talking about the supporting cast of the story here because that involves spoilers. However, I can talk about our main cast without spoilers being too much of a problem. The Cult. They are the primary antagonist of this issue, and I would imagine they will be for the entire story arc as well. They are just as mysterious as the new drug they are pushing. Filihert Poncho Pozuelos. He's the character besides our main protagonist that we learn the most about. He's Butch's partner, and judging by the interaction between the two, he's been a long-suffering partner. In the brief moments we get with him, and based on part of his bio in the supplementary art book, he seems to be the type of cop who does everything by the book. Lastly, our protagonist, Butch Killiogan. This is the most fleshed out character, and we are given a clear idea of who the character is meant to be. And that's how things should be when the story spends most of its page count focused on this character. While I did call Butch a cliche in my synopsis, it's clear reading this story that he's both the butt of the joke and an homage to action heroes who came before him. His characterization reminds me of the version of Ash Williams we see in the Evil Dead TV series. A character who is a cocky jerk and maybe a bit of a dullard, but he knows how to take care of business. Before getting into the quality of the book itself and the pricing, I'm going to give all of you a peek behind the curtain for some fun. Even if it weren't for the Japanese onomatopoeia that appears throughout the book, the manga influence of Butch Killiogan comes across clearly through the story's black and white artwork, and by the way the story is formatted and flows. When asked about his influences, Stoffels stated manga like the late Kentaro Miura's Berserk as an inspiration for how to tell his story, and the works of Imanishi Hiroyuki, who I know from the film Dead Leaves, John Kay, known for Ren and Stimpy, and Bruce Timm, best known for his work on pretty much every cartoon based on a DC comic during the 90s and early noughts for inspiration for his own art style. I can see the John Kay inspiration in some of Stoffels' exaggerated facial expressions, and I felt so stupid after the Bruce Timm revelation because there was something that felt very familiar to me about Butch's design that I just couldn't put my finger on during my reading.
Something about that chin.
After Stoffels mentioned this inspiration, all I could see is Bruce Timm's version of Superman in Butch Killiogan's face. In the podcast interview I mentioned at the top of the video, Stoffels also mentioned Judge Dredd and the Sylvester Stallone action satire movie Demolition Man as inspiration for the story. I can't give any more details on that due to spoilers, but you'll understand once you give it a read. By far, the most interesting piece of background came from the art book. Butch Killiogan started life as an unmade run-and-gun video game, and you can see the clear Rambo inspiration for the original version of the character here. It later morphed into an arcade-style beat-em-up with a Butch that looks more like the character we ended up getting. Stoffels decided he wanted to focus more on storytelling than make a game, which is how we got the book we now have. I asked him why he chose comics as the medium for telling the story rather than crowdfunding something animated. His explanation had everything to do with simplicity. He'd never made a comic before, and it was something he knew he could do by himself and have complete creative control over. While if he did an animated series or a movie, he would have to rely on more people, which could potentially lead to more problems in creating his story. I don't need to say that I feel that Stoffels knocked it out of the park with choosing to go the comic book route. And personally, just because I grew up playing the original Contra and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games, I would still like to see this series get enough of a following where the production of even a short couch co-op hybrid run-and-gun beat-em-up spin-off game could be a possibility. Now finally moving on to the finale of this review ramble, there is a physical copy of Butch Killiogan #1 that was available exclusively to backers of the crowdfunding campaign. However, I'm not able to attest to the quality of the book itself as I backed the digital-only tier that came with the supplemental art book. The digital release was inexpensive at €10 or 11 in freedom money. It should be pretty obvious by the glowing review I've given this book that I feel it was $11 well spent, but I do now regret not picking up the physical copy. You can buy the digital copy of the book right now on Amazon for $8 plus tax. If you ask me, that's a steal for 116 pages. I do hope that this series gets enough of a following where we can get a physical omnibus when the series is completed. And if what's to come is as good as what we've seen so far, I'll definitely pick that up if it happens. To any viewers out there who scored a physical copy, please feel free to give details on its quality in the comments. I give Butch Killiogan number 1 a 4 out of 5. It did turn out to be the turn-off-your-brain stupid comedic fun that I was expecting, with some surprises I wasn't expecting. I look forward to the next issue, and Sven has my dollar once the crowdfunding for that begins.
If you like this story so much, then why haven't you said what your favorite part is?
My favorite part of Butch Killiogan number 1 takes place shortly after the spoiler moment I mentioned earlier. It's this full-page splash right here. I like it partly because it is terrifying, partly because it's the most unique way I've ever seen the mesmerizing effect done, and partly because of where on earth did Sven get the idea for this imagery from. I have links to the Butch Killiogan website and to where you can buy the digital copy in the description below, along with links to Sven Stoffels' website, YouTube channel, and various social media pages. That's really all I have to say about Butch Killiogan number 1. I would like to give a big thanks to Sven Stoffels for answering my questions and giving me some insight on his creative process. For my next video, I'll be doing one more comic review with light spoilers before I finish the comic deep dive I've been working on since December. And speaking of December, since that's when my last video came out, I'm really sorry for the lack of content lately. But as I said in one of my previous videos, I'll try to get a video out monthly as long as my personal and work life permits. I'll tell you folks right now that my work life definitely has not permitted. But there is some good news. I saw that despite my absence, I recently crossed 500 subscribers. I'm really flattered by all this. I never expected that 10 people would want to come back and listen to my rambling when I started this channel, let alone 50 times that. God bless all of you. If you're new here, or a returning viewer who just hasn't yet, give me a subscribe if you don't want to miss out on what I have planned next and want to be a member of the first 1,000 subs. If you like what I'm doing and want to help this channel continue to grow, give this video a share, like, or leaving a comment would be greatly appreciated. Also, don't be afraid to give me a follow on Letterboxd or Twitter, which are linked in the description. Don't forget, go out and form your own opinions, and don't blindly follow some chosen herd or my word alone. I'm just Zilla, and this has been my moronic opinion. Thank you for your time.